when I was growing up in the 1990s in El Paso's Lower Valley, all 5 of my older brothers worked at Levi's on Pelicano. And for those of you who know what I'm talking about, we know that in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, the garment industry was the major industry of El Paso. And for my family, all 5 of my brothers worked there. And I remember that very vividly. There was the expectation that when I graduated from Baylor High School in 1993, that I too would go and work at Levi's. But you know, there's a great quote by Alexis de Tocqueville, and he said, in America, every generation is a new hope. And no one knows that better than immigrants. And no one knows that better than my mom. And so for my mom, recognizing that I was perhaps her last hope, the youngest of 6 boys to graduate high school, she really pushed me on to higher education. So I started off at community college on the Pell Grant, and I cobbled up enough credit hours to be able to then transfer on to UTEP. And it was at UTEP that my life was changed in the most positive of ways. I started to meet people like Patricia Macias, like Nestor Valencia, like Sandra Sanchez Almanzan, and Raymond Caballero, who I'll talk about in just a second, and his wife, Mary Hall Caballero. And I started reading about Mexican-American literature and El Paso history. I started to also find my own sort of position within the world. And most importantly, I started to realize and recognize how fortunate and how lucky I have been. The idea to he who much is given, much is expected really started to blossom in me at UTEP. And it's something that I have tried to carry with me ever since. The idea that a scrawny kid born and raised south of I-10 in El Paso's Lower Valley is running for mayor is not lost on me, ladies and gentlemen. And so please know that I feel very privileged and honored to just even be talking to you tonight and just to be able to say those words within the same sentence. You know, the impetus for me running probably happened on the morning of November 9th, 2016. I woke up Olivia like I do most mornings and got her ready for school. And the first words out of Olivia's mouth were, "Dad, did she win?" The she in this story obviously is Hillary Clinton. And the response to Olivia was, "No, Mama, she did not win." And the tears started flowing down her face. They started flowing down my face. And what seemed like an eternity, Olivia and I hugged at the top of her bed for 10, 15 minutes. We have now seen the destruction that this president has done to our country, what this president has done to this community, what this president has done to our beloved border region. That's number 1. Number 2, to Congresswoman Escobar's point, in 2012, the previous mayor, who is also running for mayor, the incumbent, inherited $500 million of taxpayer-funded money. He inherited a world-class master plan of which I was fortunate enough to manage. And what should have been the next several 8 years should have been the most filled with prosperity and promise and everything that we would expect from a great American city has instead been one of the most stagnant and disappointing eras of our time. My friends, those 2 things are enough to make us recognize that this is not the time to sit this one out, and that is why I am running for mayor of El Paso. I want to give you another anecdote before I get into the platform that I want to present to you tonight. As Veronica mentioned, the first political campaign that I helped manage and be a part of was in 2000, Raymond Caballeros. And it's interesting that so many things the things that Raymond Caballero was talking about, we're still talking about today. Fighting for El Paso, increasing wages, making El Paso more competitive, and ensuring that we stop the brain drain. And I want to be clear, people like Beto and Veronica and others, subsequent to Mayor Caballero's term in office, worked really diligently to ensure that those things happened and that El Paso was on the upswing. As I mentioned, things started to shift in 2012. You know, I am an urban planner by profession, and I study cities. And cities, especially now in the 21st century, are very competitive, and they are competing for talent, and they are competing for young people, and they are competing for retirees. That so many of our young men and women are choosing to move somewhere else speaks more about us than it speaks about them. There's a dicho in Spanish that says, uno los crea para que alguien más los disfrute. Speaking of our young children, we raise them so that someone else can benefit from them. In El Paso, it is uno los crea para que San Antonio los disfrute. Because the reality is that many of us who are parents and parents here that are joining us, the reality is that we spend so much time and energy hoping for our kids to be good people, hoping that our kids change the world, hoping that our kids contribute to their community. But the reality is that we are raising our sons and daughters to do these things in some other city. And to me, that is unacceptable. And so I am running for mayor to make sure that we are creating economic prosperity for all working families. I want to make sure that I have someone at City Hall that is going to stand up for El Paso and the border region with ganas and with ánimo and with enthusiasm. And I want to make sure that we also have a city government that is working for everyone. So let me just talk a little bit about the platform and what you can expect from a Gallinar administration. Number one, we have to diversify our economy. Our economy and our jobs cannot just be suburban franchises and call centers. We need to be able to increase wages, and we need to make sure that families are able to move up and forward. And so I want to propose several things. Number one, let's work with the things that we have. We have a beautiful geographic region. We have beautiful mountains. Let's monetize the Franklin Mountains. Let's build the 60-mile countywide to countywide trail so that those of us who live here now have an additional amenity and a great quality of life. But it also creates the opportunity for people to come visit El Paso and create a cultural heritage, cultural tourism economy. These sort of things create local jobs. They help, these are jobs that are not going to go offshore or are going to be these are jobs that are going to stay in El Paso. So again, let's make sure that we are creating the infrastructure so that more people come to El Paso and spend money. That's number one. Number two, I am the only, and so far, I was the first and so far the only candidate to have a climate change strategy. I believe that we have an opportunity to be the leading voice on climate change while we try to fix the world, but also create jobs. There's no reason why El Paso cannot be the Sun City, not just in name, but in practice. We can lead in high-tech manufacturing with UTEP and working with Congresswoman Escobar to ensure that all those thousands of UTEP graduates and engineers that are graduating from UTEP can stay here in El Paso. And number four, I want to make sure that we finish what we started with the MCA. Too many people, especially many in this chat room here today, starting with Raymond Caballero and our great Senator Elliott Shapley, have worked too hard for us not to invest and make sure that we finish what we started with the Medical Center of the Americas. Especially now during COVID, we recognize the importance of having the healthcare industry, and it needs to be much more robust and much more profound here in El Paso. Let's really be the medical center of the Americas. Let me focus a little bit about a city government that is working for all. I want to make sure that we start with community engagement. The past two administrations have really done a poor job of not engaging citizens. And so we want to make sure that we engage with people before, not after decisions are made. And we want to make sure that we get the buy-in from community at the very beginning to ensure that these projects that we have been promised since 2012 are finished and completed. I want to speak about legacy neighborhoods. Those sort of neighborhoods where many first and second generation El Pasoans first achieved the American dream, that have given way to suburban sprawl. I want to make sure that we are reinvesting in these neighborhoods, fixing streets, fixing sidewalks, fixing parks, to ensure that people are now coming back to the urban core, to ensure that we repopulate those areas that are depleting resources, including the tax base, and including the school and school system that continues to deteriorate year after year because we continue to build outside in the fringes. So I want to make sure that we are focusing on legacy neighborhoods as part of my administration. There's a few more things, folks. I also want to make sure that we finish what we started in downtown. To Congresswoman Escobar and Beto O'Rourke's point, a lot of work has been done, okay? We need to acknowledge that a lot of work has been done, but there's still a lot of work that needs to happen. I wanna make sure that we have housing opportunities for rich and poor, for young and old, again, so that people wanting to be in El Paso have housing options beyond just what we are building outside of Loop 375. In terms of downtown redevelopment, we also need more retail, and we need to reinvigorate those vacant buildings within the urban core. And then finally, I want to make sure that we build Caballero's long legacy and beautiful dream of a downtown Central Park. That is very important because it adds to the quality of life of everyone in the region. And again, it helps attract people to El Paso and jobs to our local economy. And then finally, there's this idea of when the politics in Washington change, I want to be ready with a plan to start thinking about international trade, about international commerce, and about a light rail system between El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. This is a generational dream, my friends. I get it, but we have to start thinking about it now, and we have to start planning for it so that Olivia and Joaquin and their friends are able, and their kids are able to benefit from the system. So imagine having a light rail system between El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. It goes from Juarez to Chihuahua to Zacatecas, Zacatecas to Mexico City in the south. And it goes from El Paso to Las Cruces, Las Cruces to Albuquerque, Albuquerque to Santa Fe in the north. And it will really be a Camino Real for the 21st century. It celebrates our history, it celebrates our technology, and it celebrates our imagination, and really the beautiful culture and history that we have, and we should be celebrating. I want to end with this, and we'll hope there's going to be some questions and hope to engage with folks. You know, El Paso has a history of innovation. We had one of the first international light rail systems in the world, streetcar systems in the world. We continue to be the first or second safest city in the country. We still have the only Texas NCAA championship in Texas with Texas Western in 1966. We were one of the first cities to implement no smoking ban in restaurants and bars. And after August 3rd of last year, I saw this community come together like never before. I'm seeing us do that again, once again with COVID, people calling each other, Beto organizing volunteers at the food bank, people delivering food, people wearing their masks, caring for each other. And let's not forget that, as Stephanie mentioned, the first Latina congresswoman in Texas came from El Paso. And let's not forget that one of our own almost made it to the presidency. That is something to not take lightly. It is great achievements by great El Pasoans, and I believe that we could continue that legacy. And we have what it takes. We have the climate, we have the people, we have a young population, we have a location in the middle of the Western Hemisphere. There is nothing, to Conrad Hilton's words, to hem our dreams and aspirations, because we breathe the air that allows us to do these things. Let me finally say one last thing. I have no illusion that the next several years will be some of the most difficult, and that we're going to have to recover from COVID and this pandemic, and that we are going to have to do everything we can to ensure that our friends and neighbors and local businesses recover economically, spiritually, and in all aspects of their lives. Already, the city government has said that the pandemic will take 2 to 3 years. The recovery will take 2 to 3 years. So if you are going to, or thinking of voting for one of the two incumbents, from day one, they will be obsolete. They will spend 3 of their 4 years trying to get us back to where we need to be. I suggest that I think we can get it done in 1 to 2 years. And if the residents and voters of El Paso will have me, I will be your mayor for 8 years. And so imagine that we spend 1 to 2 years recovering from the pandemic, it gives us an additional 6 years to do the great things that I just talked about. My friends, I am overwhelmed with emotion, and I am so happy to be sharing my ideas with you here tonight. I genuinely believe that we can be a great, if not the greatest American city. It is not hyperbole and it's not exaggeration. It is how strongly I feel about us and how strongly I feel about our future.